All right, so today I just wanted to show you what I believe is probably one of the best looking Unreal Engine 5 games currently out there. This game is called Empire of the Ants. I know it had another name as well, something like Undergrowth or something, I can't really remember. But currently we're testing this game with the RTX 4080 Super. That is paired with a 14700K CPU. I got a different CPU. And that again is paired with 32 gigabytes of DDR5, 6400 megatransfers per second, CL32 memory. All the specs were on the screen right there. But back to the game, we're running at 4K. At the moment on the high preset, I do have DLSS enabled. I just wanted to show you what the game actually looks like. So it's touted as an Ant RTS kind of game. I haven't gotten that far yet. The game does have one or two flaws. Unfortunately, it did crash on me a few times, and the saving is kind of strange. So I had to start from scratch every time the game crashed. But I didn't progress that far. So the game does use Lumen and Nanite, and I do believe it uses Lumen for global illumination and reflections, but it also seems to use SSR for reflections as well. As you can see, that leaf over there does not disappear when we move out of screen space, but the resolution does drop a bit, it seems. So I do think it uses a combination of SSR and Lumen for reflections as well. All right, so I just wanted to show you what the performance is like. So let's go over the settings here. The settings are very basic actually. Currently we're at 4K. It does have DLSS. That's the only thing it has, TSR or DLSS, so no FSR or XeSS. Now this game was made by a AA or indie studio, so kind of a small team, so maybe they'll add it in future. But then we do have the usual presets here. We do have ultra performance and DLAA. This is the only native option you have in this game. TSR does not give you a native option. So we'll just go with DLAA. It does have frame generation as well, DLSS frame generation only. And then if we have a look at the graphic settings, it's just high, medium, and low. That's pretty much it. And then it does have landscape tessellation. So it does make a big difference if we disable it. So tessellation adds height and depth to ground objects. So it does say that if you do have issues with an AMD GPU, you can just disable that. So right, let's see what the performance here is like. So 4K native DLAA, and I'm recording this at 4K as well. I spent quite a bit trying to optimize my visual quality for YouTube, and hopefully it comes out well. I did a test video as well. Now there will be some screen tearing because the capture card does capture screen tearing as well. It is an external capture card for this. I don't want to talk too much here just about my systems and stuff, but you can see here that the game looks great. Now even if you don't have a 4K monitor, I'd urge you to play this back in YouTube using 4K. Just it will make a bit of a difference just because of the way YouTube encodes these things. So 4K would look much better even though you don't have a 4K monitor. Right, so at 4K we are almost able to hit 60 frames per second here. I'm just going to move towards the open grasslands because I do think it does become a little bit more demanding there, and the ant simulation is actually pretty good, and you can just see that the detail in this game really is phenomenal. And I also think this is one of the few games where I'll leave depth of field on, because it just gives you that whole immersion of you are a small insect in this big forest. But just look at, I'm just going to stand in the sun here. Just look at the detail of the ant. I think we can zoom in a bit. I think the detail, everything here just looks phenomenal. And the performance is pretty good as well. 4K Ultra Native DLAA getting us around 60-ish frames per second. Now this game has almost no stuttering, no traversal or shader compilation stutter, which is great to see. There's also not a shader compilation step. I don't think, if there was one, it was hidden. So it's kind of strange that there's no shader compilation stutter. And that coming from an indie developer, right? AAA studios can never. All right, so 4K, I'm going to just enable DLSS here quickly. Let's see. I mean, we started off with DLSS, so you kind of know what the performance there is like. And one good thing about this is the game is rendered in the background. So if you change DLSS settings here, you can immediately see the performance change, right? So ultra performance, we're getting 160-ish frames per second. So DLSS quality, let's just reset our numbers. I'm going to go back to where we were. So we should be able to maintain 80 plus frames per second here at all times. Now, I know this is an RTX 4080 Super. It's a pretty high-end GPU, and not everybody has one, but the performance here is pretty decent, I'd say. DLSS quality or even balanced should be able to get you 60 frames per second on something like a 4070 Super type GPU or class GPU. So I think this is definitely acceptable considering the visuals. It's really good looking. All right, so DLSS quality there, getting us 90-ish frames per second. I'm just going to leave everything up there because it's not really in the way. So let's go to DLSS balanced, and now we are getting around 100 and something frames per second. Now, DLSS balanced still looks plenty good in this game. I did start to notice some issues with DLSS performance, especially in the reflections, the resolution detail in terms of reflections, or when it comes to the reflections, it started to break up quite a bit and it did not look that good. So over here, there's no reflections, obviously, but on the water surfaces, it did not look that good. So DLSS balanced is probably where I'd be comfortable playing this game at 4K. So and you can see it still looks plenty good. All right, so now you can see the ant properly. I think they've done a great job here with the visuals. Now, in terms of gameplay, some might find it boring. I'll try and progress a bit in the game and actually see what like the RTS elements of the game is or are. So, but first we just here to test performance. So that was balanced, I think this way. Performance 115 frames per second. So not that big a jump from balanced to performance. We were seeing just above 100 frames per second. DLSS balanced as well. And as I said, there are some visual breakups. I'd not recommend performance over balanced, considering that the performance is not that great. The difference in performance is not that great. So the DLSS performance here getting us 110 something frames per second. So let's just go ahead and enable frame generation. I'll keep on closing that. So I want to see, so 110-ish frames per second. Let's see, it's got auto and on. Like I don't know why people include auto. Just on or off, that's enough. So DLSS performance here getting us 140-ish frames per second when we enable frame generation. The game still looks good. There's very little ghosting. Like I did notice some, especially DLSS performance with frame generation enabled, by just moving the camera quite a lot, but I don't think that'll come across in the YouTube video, no matter what settings I use. YouTube compression does still play a role. All right, I'm stuck. Right, so I just want to test one other thing, just DLSS quality here with frame generation enabled. I keep on going to the wrong tab there. So DLSS quality got us between 80 and 90 frames per second, right? And now I think this is actually perfect. 120 frames per second. With DLSS quality and frame generation enabled, I think it is better than DLSS performance, 140 frames per second with the same settings. I do think DLSS quality does look quite a lot better, and especially in a detailed environment like this, you'd want a little bit more of the crispness. I did notice a little bit, the image looks quite a bit softer with DLSS performance enabled. So I think DLSS quality frame generation is perfect. Yeah. All right. I think that's going to be it for our DLSS preset testing. Let me disable DLSS here, and then we'll just do quality preset testing, not DLSS presets. So we'll go to DLAA here, and I'm just going to do it in the menu itself, right? So let me just, unfortunately, I can't get rid of the lows there. I can do that with MSI Afterburner, but not with CapFrame X. So if we have a look at our quality settings here, when you use a preset, you can't manually change it. You have to switch to custom for these settings to change. But if we have a look there, we are at native, right? So DLAA 90 frames per second. And on the medium preset, we are slightly above 90 frames per second. The low preset is getting us 103 frames per second. So around a 10-12% boost to our frame rate. But on low, the game still looks plenty good. It's so weird. I do think that these guys are wizards when it comes to environmental design. They definitely made full use here of Unreal Engine 5 without any of the drawbacks. Like, the performance is pretty good, visuals are pretty good. There's no like unnecessary blurriness that's usually caused with TAA upscaling, and I mean, sure, we do use DLSS here, but it still uses temporal anti-aliasing, right? Because it uses data from the previous frames. Anyway, so that's it on 4K low. Game still looks plenty good. Sure, there are some detail like in the grass, etc., that you'll notice in the shadows, lighting maybe, that's not on the ultra preset, but just playing the game, it still looks very, very good. Sure, I do now notice now that the environment is not as detailed, but it's still it's still very, very good. All right, so that's it for 4K. Let's move on to 1440p. All right, so we're now at 1440p, DLAA no frame generation, graphics is set to high, and if that's too big, I'll be right back. All right, that's better, and as I said, 1440p on the high preset, native DLAA getting us about 100 frames per second here, which is about par for the course, right? 60 frames per second, 4K, 100 frames per second, 1440p. And the game still looks plenty good. It runs very well. I'm not going to test too much at 1440p. I do think we got a good indication of the performance at 4K, but I just love running around in these environments. I'm going to say the one last time that the game looks phenomenal. All right, so, and you can actually look around standing up like a meerkat. All right, so 115 frames per second average there, and just as you can see, the lows are pretty respectable as well. So let's just first see if there is some scaling when it comes to the graphical settings at 1440p. We are still fully GPU bound, even though our GPU power is slightly lower. We are sitting at not even 300 watt GPU power, so we're not fully utilizing the GPU in terms of power usage. So let's see if we go to graphics here, getting 118 frames per second, and then on medium that goes to 124, 142 frames per second on the low preset. Okay, so I do notice that in the distance we definitely lose some detail on the low preset, but still, if you're looking for a high refresh rate native experience, then there you go. 120 frames per second, 1440p native on the low preset, and game definitely still looks passable when it comes to visuals. All right, so let's change this back to the high preset, and then we'll do some DLSS scaling, and then that's going to be it. I was actually very curious about this game when I saw it the first time on a GameRanks video. It piqued my interest just from a visual perspective, right? We see a lot of talk around Unreal Engine 5, and I'm pretty negative when it comes to Unreal Engine 5, but for a good reason. It's usually like overblown, but it performs very poorly. Like the hype around Unreal Engine 5, I think, is overblown. But these developers seems to have actually used it very well, yeah. So 158, 159 frames per second here. This is actually very good. This is without frame generation, right? So 150 frames per second, 4080 Super. Even if you have to halve your frame rate here, you'll get 75, 80 frames per second on like a more mid-range last-gen GPU. So the performance of this game, I do think, is pretty sufficient. Now, DLSS quality at 1440p, definitely still doable. And once again, I'm stuck. I'm just showing you very, very boring running around gameplay. Yeah, I do think that it will become a little bit more interesting later on, but I just wanted to show you the visuals basically, because once again, just look at that. All right, so 1440p DLSS quality getting us an average there of 148. So I don't think it's necessary to test any other DLSS options here, but let's just do them quickly. So 143, 144 frames per second with DLSS quality, 155 with balanced, then performance getting us nothing. So we are becoming CPU bound. You can see our GPU power usage is sitting at 220 watts. And then if we go to performance, it's going down to 211 watts, but our frame rate does not change. Our GPU usage just goes down. All right, so I think let's leave it on quality. We were seeing around 140 frames per second there, right? So let's enable frame generation. Let's see what the max here is. I think something is not 100% sure. Is it forcing VSync? I mean, VSync is off, yeah. Let me just see if there is some VSync issue. So I do have VSync disabled in the NVIDIA control panel as well. So I don't know why the game would force VSync here. So it seems like 158 frames per second is all we are going to be seeing in this game, with or without frame generation. All right, so I found the reason for our frame rate cap. It's not necessarily that. Let me just show you quickly. All right, so if you have a look at the game there in the background, it's running at 197 frames per second. Our frame rate limit here is set to 500. Now, with RTSS, if you select 0 as a frame rate limit, it means that there's no frame rate limit, except over here, it then defaults it to 120. So I do think because we only have VSync up to 60, maybe it allows you to go twice your VSync limit, maybe. So the way to get above 120 frames per second is if we increase our frame rate limit in RTSS for some reason. Okay, so to 100, but we can go above 200. So it's going to make it, let's make it 999, and that way we know we won't be limited by RTSS. So now if we do DLSS scaling again, so DLAA is getting us 114-ish frames per second here. Then DLSS quality getting us 158 frames per second. Balanced is getting us 170 frames per second, 169, and performance is getting us 180, and then ultra performance almost 200, right? So let's go to DLAA, yeah, so 100 and something frames per second, and then we enable frame generation. I think this would be a okay, this is an insanely high frame rate. You're definitely not going to notice this input latency with this higher frame rate. And I also don't think we do get guns in this game. I don't think this is a squirrel with a gun kind of setup. So input latency would be negligible anyway, or slightly higher input latency, I should say. There will be input latency. If there's enough input latency, it'll definitely bother some people, but over here, this is perfectly fine. So 158, 170 frames per second at times. I think this is actually where I'd be playing this game. DLSS set to quality. Well, this is actually DLAA. So DLAA with frame generation enabled. So I just want to see what DLSS quality can actually do for us. So if we just go DLSS quality, 175 frames per second there, and 214 frames per second. Okay. So yeah, this is a very, very good experience. A very good looking game, very well running game as well. Very few Unreal Engine 5 issues, none actually in the 2 hours or so that I've played so far. So there we have it. As I said, probably not a lot of people will be playing this game, right? It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but it is on sale, or not on sale, it's on Steam. I paid about $25 for it, so I mean, I think it might be a good game to just test Unreal Engine 5 or GPUs with Unreal Engine 5, because we don't have the annoying traversal stuttering and shader compilation stuttering issues. Alright, I think now that's going to be the end of this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and as always, we hope to see you in the next one.